Right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 94 of Retuning Your Firm. And delighted to be with you today. I've identified three areas that I think may well come up in the conversation today. As you can see on the slide in front of you, skills, clients, and growth. And I think there's a big focus on marketing, so that's probably where the clients one is going to come in particularly strongly. Anyway, I'm Richard Chaplin and absolutely delighted to be your host for today. There is a slight change in the lineup of people today because unfortunately, John Rowland, who is our political guru, is on a holiday in France, and the internet connectivity is unfortunately means he can't be with us live today. So let's now turn to my co-host, and I'd like to welcome Martin Bunch. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
And
Thank you, Richard.
and he's come to share today's show with me. For those of you who don't know Martin, he is the managing partner of a law firm, Bates Wells. They're very well known, I think, for being possibly the first firm, certainly firm of any size, to become a B Corp. And we'll be talking, I'm sure, a little bit about that area, along with many others. So welcome, Martin. And he's going to be introducing the questions in a minute. And I will now turn to our second presenter, and this is Alastair Beddow. And I will let Martin tell you all about Alastair in a minute. And finally, I'd like to introduce our panelist, Leor Franks, who is the, I'll get this right, Chief Business Development and Marketing Officer. Is that right, sir? I think so. At law firm Kingsley, Napley. Others will know him as the chair of the Managing Partners Forum Strategy and Marketing Group, which he does with great aplomb. And if you're not catching the meetings that group is holding, then you're definitely missing out if you're in the marketing space. So welcome to Leor, and he's going to be joining us for the panel session. So now a quick update on some of the things that are going on in the forum, because it's always quite fun. Firstly, there are lots of people who are watching the show. So please do make sure that you're watching the videos from the past show. And we're also focusing, as you may remember from the last show a month ago, very much on coaching and looking at coaching as being a very important area if you want your people who are in client-facing roles to be really good at winning work. And we may pick that up, I suspect, during the day. And the last one was, and we'll come to this in a minute, I'm really pleased that the members of the Strategy and Marketing Research Panel, and we had, I think a few of them, they are anonymous, by the way, but I think there's a few of them listening in today to get the first dibs as to what they came up with on their particular tracker, and then we'll be discussing that as a panel. So I think that's probably about enough from me for the moment. So I will now hand over to Martin, my co-host, and he will be giving you a quick introduction to Alastair, who will then tell us all about the tracker findings. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Richard. And good morning, everybody. Yes, I'd like to introduce you to Alastair Beddow, who's the Managing Director of Meridian West. Meridian West is a research consultancy supporting professional services firms on their growth and client strategies. And he has done a remarkable job in putting together some slides about the strategy and marketing tracker, which Richard was just referring to, and some really fascinating results from that. So, Alastair, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone. So absolutely, it's some hot off the press data for everybody today, and those on the call who are part of our research panel. Thank you so much for taking part in that. What I'm going to do over the next 10 minutes or so is take you through some of the headlines and key data from what we've seen in the May strategy and marketing tracker. So I'm just going to bring up my screen so you can see some of that as I talk it through. So hopefully that's now visible to everybody. Great, I'm seeing a thumbs up, which is fantastic. So in terms of the tracker, really great to have this kind of first iteration to share with you as part of the kind of regular strategy and marketing tracker, covering a wide range of professional services, small, large, mid-size, law firms, accountancy firms, and others as well. So it's a really cross-sector view of professional services, and I think some really interesting things emerging from our May iteration. So first off, I want to share just some overall headlines with you, and then we'll dive into a little bit of the data itself that brings these to life for you. So I think first off, looking at the big picture, one of the things that we've seen so far in this tracker is that optimism, how people feel about their firm, about the market, and about the sector generally, has improved since our last piece of research amongst a similar audience. So 6 months ago, at the start of the year, you may remember our international marketing benchmark comparing to where we are there. Optimism is definitely back to a degree, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. We're also seeing a continued focus around client experience and related initiatives. They continue to dominate the top priority list for strategy and marketing leaders, and though that is balanced with some other areas which I'll talk about shortly. One of the things that we've seen is allied to that kind of more general optimism is a sense that headcount and spend in strategy and marketing is expected to recover somewhat over the next 6 months. So people feeling a little bit more bullish about spending power throughout the second half of the year. In the tracker itself, one of the things that we've done is we've looked at 4 key themes, one of which is AI. I'm going to do a bit of a deeper dive into that this morning, because we've got some interesting movement, I think, over the last 6 months compared to when we last did some similar research. I think what we're seeing now is that majority of firms, around 3/4, saying that AI is going to be a critical part of their growth strategy going forward. And what we're seeing is many more strategy and marketing leaders saying that they're closely involved in shaping that agenda. And that is quite a significant shift from what we saw just 6 months ago. And alongside that, what we're seeing is many firms are now put in place a lot of those fundamental aspects of having an AI strategy, so having the budget, having the requisite policies, training, and even those specialist roles within their teams. Again, big movements there in just 6 months, and I think people expect that to continue to grow rapidly throughout the rest of the year. So I think some really interesting things to dive into. So let's take a look at that now. So as I said, to start with, one of the things that we've seen is that the general outlook for the next 6 months seems to be a little bit more optimistic than what we were seeing 6 months ago when we completed some similar research. So you can see there that around about half expecting the economy to improve. We obviously had some relatively good economic data over the last couple of months. No surprise there. Obviously, the announcement of the election, certainly in the UK, may have kind of tied into some of that optimism, a sense that there may be change coming relatively soon that may unlock some economic good headwinds there. And I've just put up the comparison with where we were in that international marketing benchmark from kind of December 23, January 24. And you can see the numbers there up quite significantly. So, the economy as a whole, proportion there doubled, 24% to 49%, expecting the improvement, and similar increases in some of those other areas as well. So I think a general optimism. In terms of what that means for where people will focus, the strategy and marketing leaders on our panel very much dominated by, I think, a number of related client experience initiatives. So around half, 49%, putting obtaining feedback within their top priorities for the next 6 months. That's up 10 percentage points since our last similar bit of data on this. And you can see there those top 3 areas: obtaining feedback, improvements to client experience, account management, all related to kind of similar issues around, being really close to clients, understanding their needs, and being responsive to that. I think what's also interesting is we're seeing in that joint third place there, enhancing productivity. And we'll come on to talk about AI and some of the opportunities and challenges around that, I think, in some of the data in the discussion later. But clearly that's a big issue as well, is not just trying to do more, but trying to do it in a more productive way. We also saw in the last piece of data that talent recruitment engagement was flagged as a big issue amongst firms and amongst marketing leaders in particular. So that piece around enhancing team engagement, I think, not a surprise to see it up there as a priority still. Some data briefly on where we are on things like headcount and spending. So we asked people first over to tell us about what's been happening over the last 6 months. And you can see there, big increase in activity for all or majority of marketing and strategy leaders. Around 1 in 5 saying that their team has been growing over that last 6 months, and around a third, 31%, saying that their budget has increased. We then ask people to look forward to the rest of the year, the next 6 months, and how that's likely to change. And what we can see there is, big shift towards the green there. So 42% expecting their team to grow, 41% expecting spending to grow as well. So I think a reasonably optimistic picture that paints what we saw before in terms of that general optimism about the market. A couple of interesting stats around marketing spend. One of the things that we look at in the tracker is around percentage of revenue spent on marketing and BD. That's something which, as you can see, has fluctuated up and down a little bit. Some of this historic data back to 2020 is taken from our international marketing benchmark, but you can see from 2024, the start of the year, to where we are at the end of May now, we have seen quite a significant increase there. And again, I think that plays into what we saw before about an anticipation around increasing spend. When we asked this question at the end of 2023 and the start of 2024, we had about a third who expected this to increase. So that definitely that trend is very much what people expected to see 6 months ago. That's very much borne out. As I said, in the tracker, we also take a deep dive into 4 really fundamental, kind of interesting topics, I think, that play across all professional services firms: AI, innovation, sustainability, and training. But a number of questions that we ask people, and I'm just going to give you a flavour of some of those now. First off, we asked, to what extent people feel each of these 4 things is a critical part of their firm's growth strategy. Perhaps no surprise that most people feel like each of these areas are, but I think the thing to really highlight here now is that 3/4 saying that AI is going to be a critical part of that growth strategy going forward. Obviously, that's risen up the agenda really significantly over the last 12 to 18 months. Question perhaps about to what extent that pressure is coming from clients. So we asked people, to what extent do clients expect you to deploy these things in your engagements with them? So just over half of firms saying at the moment that their clients are kind of really demanding that AI in that interaction, either behind the scenes or directly with them. Again, it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the next 6 months. But I think what's really clear is that many people see this as a productivity driver. We asked people around how it's likely to result in increased productivity, both for frontline advisors. There was a separate question around increased productivity for business services teams, and both over 90% there. So AI really seen as that productivity driver, as we saw before, productivity a key priority for the function. So no surprises there. But I think what's really interesting is, to what extent do firms feel that they're really taking a marketing leading approach here? Most firms on average put themselves somewhere in the middle on that kind of 4 to 7 range on a 10-point scale. So, still experimenting, still finding their feet very much. But what I think is interesting now is that many more marketing and strategy leaders are getting closely involved across the AI agenda. That's a big shift from what we saw just 6 months ago. 61% now either kind of collaborative or taking a leading approach to that. And then finally, just to give you a little bit of a flavor around what the activity actually looks like in terms of AI. As I said earlier, we're seeing many more firms now saying that they're putting some of those fundamental building blocks in place that will enable them to activate their AI strategies. So again, big shifts here in some of these areas in just 6 months. So for example, nearly 3/4 now have got that AI usage policy in place. That's up a big 32% on where it was even at the start of 2024. So it's been a big focus clearly over the last 6 months for many firms. But some of these other areas, we've seen big shifts as well. Having ring-fenced budgets, proportion there has doubled over the last 6 months. Many more firms are putting dedicated resources there in terms of budgets. Also in terms of training, that's up almost 20%. And also, interestingly, I think having specialists within the strategy and marketing field who actually have those AI skills in-house, still at 18%, only 1 in 5, but that's a big move forward even in 6 months as well. And just to leave you with a sense of how this might change going forward, again, you can see these levels in place today, as we saw before, 73% AI usage policy, etc. The light blue I'm going to bring up now is the proportion you expect to implement these things later in 2024. And you can see some big areas of increase there. So in particular, things like internal training, where we've got an extra 42% saying that they're going to be focusing on that for the rest of the year. So I think lots of activity planned. And obviously, we'll be keen to see in our next tracker whether that ambition is actually realized or not. So I think plenty of interesting insights for us to digest there. So thanks.
Thanks very much, Alastair. And I think that was a really interesting set of information. I was talking to Leor about it just before we started this session, and he was kind of saying, yes, when he's in the market, he's out talking to his peers, and there are some certain areas in it that he finds are really what you would expect. But there's others that I think raises a number of issues. So Leor, maybe we could start off with introducing you and invite you to come and give your thoughts on what you've just heard on the tracker.
Thanks very much, Richard and Alastair. Great presentation, very interesting insights. Thank you to all the panelists who participated. As mentioned earlier on, I work at Kingsley Napley and look after marketing and comms. 2 or 3 things stand out to me from the data. AI is obviously a theme. Everyone in my peer group is talking about AI every day, and I think there are 2 reasons for that. There's fear of missing out. You know, everyone wants to be part of the latest trends. No one wants to be left behind. But I think there's also a desire amongst most of my peers to improve the efficiency and efficacy of their teams. And there's a sense that in the short term, even before AI is fully functioning in every sense of the phrase, it can be useful. My concern really, though, is what is the unintended consequence of rushing towards AI? And I think about the juniors in our team and how we train and develop them. And a lot of the learning that those juniors go through is by going through the process work of uploading an article to a website and writing a summary paragraph, or producing a LinkedIn post, or putting an invitation for an event together. And yes, AI can do that today more quickly, sometimes more eloquently, with fewer spelling and punctuation issues than in some situations. But my fear is if we remove those process tasks too quickly without a plan to train and develop our juniors, in the medium term, we'll have a gap, a skills gap, we'll have a resourcing gap. So that's a concern for me about some of the hubris that you might see in the data. The other point I might make, if I can, is about the focus of priorities. And that actually surprised me a little bit, because if you look at the top 3 priorities that Alastair kindly presented, they're very important tasks, processes, things about getting client feedback and building a client feedback program, which is actually the #1 priority for my team at Kingsley Napley. There's a second point about improving client service, which is, you know, valuable and important at all points in the cycle. And there's a third point about account management, improving account management processes. They are all worthwhile and valuable and important, and so many firms have not invested in those. But what surprised me about seeing those at the top of the chart is they are all about existing clients. They're all about making more of what you already have. They're not things that firms tend to focus on in a high growth environment. They tend to be the kind of things firms do when it's hard to win in the market, when the market is contracting, when competitive intensity is up. So that was a little bit of a disconnect for me, because all of the data we hear and see elsewhere is about huge growth, huge potential, economic recovery, more transactions, etc. So I found that slightly unusual, that the focus of many of the peer group is on what you might do when you can't win in the market, but nonetheless very valuable work to do.
Can I just follow up on that, Leo? Why do you? I mean, it is unusual. I think that is the case. And coming back, that those, especially the client feedback and getting the client experience improving at the moment. I mean, after all we've had with COVID and you know the sort of virtual clients and things like that, why do you think it's coming back now? Because if the economy is improving and people are feeling more confident, why would they be looking to their clients more? I mean, clients are our lifeblood of all professional services firms, but I mean, you know, is that something that is led by the marketing teams, or is it coming from the firms, you think?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, if I answer in my own case for the work that I do at Kingsley Napley, we went through a 5-year business planning process last year, and we asked all of our functions, and we asked clients, we asked all of our business support teams about what worked, what didn't work, what they needed to invest in and improve for the medium term. And the number one BD and marketing gap, if you will, in our processes was around client feedback. We had a program that had been running before my time, but it was really quite narrow and underused, and really focused on perhaps our larger retained clients, as is probably normal for many firms. But it became clear to me that we'd underinvested there, and we needed to do more, to retain existing clients, because, you know, if there are service issues or if there are gaps in what we're doing and you don't ask the question, you can often lose the client, and you find out about it, you know, when the worst happens. But the second driver, I think, is about making sure that, at least in my world, it's making sure that we're not missing a trick when so many other larger firms have been doing this well for so many years. So my motivation was, you know, addressing the need that the business had identified, and making sure there wasn't a hole in our service offering as a BD function. I think for others it's probably similar. But again, I would have thought it's the kind of thing people prioritize when there aren't huge opportunities out there in the market. And we see many right now. So for me, it was really a reaction to the feedback that I received.
Perhaps bring in Alastair now. And Alastair, as a researcher yourself, and somebody who is the managing director of your own business, to what extent do you see these technologies as impacting your industry, the market research industry? Because I see that just as much a professional services sector
hugely,
as the legal sector. Yeah, that's fine.
So sorry, I don't know if you dropped out there for a second. Yeah, no, I think these are kind of hugely impactful actually for our own business. You know, even within the last 3, 6, 12 months, you know, it has actually been pretty transformative in the way that we work. And to Leor's point, you know, one of the things that's done and had to do is that we've had to change the way that we train people. We've had to change the way that we kind of onboard people when we're recruiting for new analysts. We're looking at kind of what skills that they have, what's their kind of, you know, aptitude for kind of learning and applying some of these things. But it isn't you know, it's not a replacement for kind of outsourcing everybody's brain. I think, you know, Leor was alluding to the fact that actually, you know, it gives you a good first draft. It produces something, you know, quickly, but it's not an end product. So, you know, we still spend a lot of time on, you know, making sure that it's quality work, that anything that's, you know, accelerated through AI, you know, has that kind of lens on it of the kind of, you know, human kind of creativity of the human brain. So, you know, it's I think absolutely transformative, but it's not a kind of replacement for you know, bringing people onto the team. You know, we haven't, you know, actually much like the tracker results, we're still, you know, activity levels have increased. You know, we are recruiting to do that. We're not expecting, you know, activity levels to increase and not to continue to hire to be able to deal with that work. The AI will supplement that, but it won't replace it.
Can I ask, Alastair, do you agree with the sort of the findings in the tracker about this sort of area as being led by the marketing strategy people? I mean, is that your experience as well, that you're finding that marketing and strategy are the ones, at least, you know, in the collaborative leading that sort of AI or the technology agenda?
I think it has to be a kind of collaborative agenda, and I think it's encouraging to see that many more strategy marketing leaders are involved in that. And as I said, that's a big change from what we saw in the last wave of the research 6 months or so ago. I think, you know, what was quite interesting is there was that dip to around 50% who are saying that actually they're seeing that driver really come from the client side. Obviously, that's, you know, that's still 50% who are, you know, seeing that. But I do think there's a risk that, you know, these tools get kind of, you know, people invest in them without a real sense of how they're going to be utilized. You know, how is it actually going to change interactions with clients? How's it going to change, you what people are expected to do internally. So just having the tool for its own sake, I don't think is the answer. It's about kind of really understanding where it adds value to that client relationship, where it delivers the efficiency in ways of working, and how you frame that benefit to the client. Is that going to be perceived as just something that enables you to reduce cost? And is there an expectation that clients are going to pay less because they see more being done by machines rather than costly human beings? So I think it raises a lot of questions that I think are still unanswered, but it's really encouraging to see that marketing BD strategy leaders are involved in driving that conversation, or at least at the forefront of it.
It's probably my chance to ask Martin a question now, so let me try and frame it. One of the comments that was picked up was that marketing is often a broadcasting function, in the sense that marketers look to make sure that lots of people hear about key messages, whereas anybody who's involved in client-facing work will often be very cautious about knowledge being shared, which is client confidential, etc., etc. So it may be that we have this sort of disconnect between, on the one hand, marketing using it quite a lot, because a lot of what they're doing can be public domain without an issue, whereas the actual people on the front line, the fee earners, the client-facing people, are actually very much more cautious. Where is the managing partner? Do you see that within your firm, Martin, or elsewhere?
I think it's a good question. I think it's a very important point, because I think there is a difference actually between the marketing strategy work that we do as a firm, pushing out content about what we're doing and such like, and the actual frontline work of the advisors. Because at the moment, the generational AI it has huge risks to it, in terms of insurance, in terms of negligence, in terms of all of those things. And I think there's a lot of hype about what it can do and what it will do, and we hear a lot from the large companies about where the law is going. But I think for all professional services firms, the actual people who are dealing with the clients have to be very careful about how they use, especially the generational AI, because of things, the risks of using it when it's not right, and you have to check it. So I think at the moment I can understand why Leor is in the front of it, or very much in dealing with the strategy of it, or leading the agenda of that, because that's where it can at the moment be used most efficiently, probably, and usefully. Whereas I think it's right that firms have to be more cautious, because otherwise you're going to throw a lot of money at these things and then suddenly find that you can't use them, or that that there's a danger. The thing about hallucinations, we've all heard of the case in America where the chap goes to court and relies on 3 cases which AI have made up, because he didn't check them properly. So I think there, and you have to have data privacy issues with closed systems, and there's ignorance about what it can do. So I think there's a long way to go yet for the frontline people. But I think actually where it can have an impact, and that's probably shown by your tracker, is in these sort of areas, because I think that can really, really help prepare and push out more content.
And just maybe bringing Leor in, if I could now. One of the things that I got the message from my own points, Leor, was around impact on headcount, and the extent to which possibly firms would be, marketing teams or leaders perhaps more exactly, would be investing in this AI and these processes to improve productivity and efficiency. But in the process, where does the next generation come from? So do you want to explore that one a bit more for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a natural tension in any professional services firm about the cost of marketing headcount. And I would naturally argue that it's an investment, something that we should be funding and supporting to help drive growth in recognition, reputation, relationships, and revenue. But those who are charged with short-term operational control of the business will see those costs as costs, because in the short term they are costs and they don't necessarily yield very much. The potential of these technologies, of course, is to reduce some of those costs by undertaking some of the processes that are fairly, shall we say, routine and lacking in high functioning requirements. So there's a natural cost saving opportunity there. But the concern that I have, that I mentioned earlier on, that you touched on, Richard, is if we just focus on cost in the short term and we take out the opportunities and the roles that are typically the training ground for marketing and BD people, in a couple of years, there will be a huge skills deficit in the team. I mean, I look at my own career. I started as a fee earner in a big 4 firm, did a variety of rotations, trained and qualified, and I immediately had an understanding of the subject matter of the practice that I worked in. So when I moved into a marketing and BD role 20 years and 1 month ago, not to count time specifically, I was marketing a practice that I had been a fee earner in, and I understood all of the types of work and the types of clients. I mean, not to the level a partner would have done, but I had a good understanding. And that came from doing the basic data entry, the basic analysis, the basic presentations. And I look at my juniors today, if we say, look, we don't need you guys to produce the content and analyze the numbers, just do the higher value stuff. Well, how are they ever going to do that if they haven't done the basic stuff that AI can do or potentially could do? And I'm sure cleverer people than I will have found solutions to that problem. I just see that as a real problem, not today, but the next couple of years, and something we need to plan for, not just run screaming towards the latest technology because it looks cool and sexy.
Can I ask about one of the things that came out of the tracker was that one of the areas was sustainability, and that people had that as over 90% as part of their growth strategy. How important do you think, I mean, especially with the election coming up, and I think Labour today were talking about their green agenda that they're going to be producing. How important do you think sustainability will be to professional services firms in the next short term?
There's a Thomson Reuters survey that some people might have seen, which I don't have in front of me, but I think from memory, sustainability was the second or third most important factor that general counsel who were interviewed by Thomson Reuters identified, partially because, of course, lots of institutions, as we know, are driven to ensure they have strong ESG policies and processes, so therefore want to push that down in their supply chain. And I certainly see in my field the need to build sustainability in our processes, but more importantly, to advocate for sustainable approaches in everything we do as a firm. And I think, I mean, my firm in particular is strong in that area. It's just been part of our mindset, our purpose, our culture for many years. But that demand from the market, no doubt, will push others to catch up if they haven't already built that into their systems and processes. Not sure I've said anything particularly new or insightful there, though.
But I think it's interesting if I could just build on what you were saying, Leor. I think if we look at what's come through in the tracker in terms of the data, I think it's pretty clear that, you know, a large majority of firms have now got many of those approaches in place in terms of, you know, capturing relevant data, reporting data on, particularly on the kind of environmental side. Because as you say, it is being expected as part of pitches, RFP processes. I think the data was around 70% of firms are doing that regularly. The vast majority of those who aren't expect to be, you know, focusing on that this year. So, you know, that's the kind of baseline requirement now. I think, you know, actually what we're also seeing is that particularly some of these other areas that touch into things like community engagement, you know, employee well-being, you know, actually really living and being a kind of purpose-led organization. I think these are the things that are kind of perhaps easier to talk about than to do, because they do require kind of investment. They do require kind of culture change. They do require strong leadership. And obviously, as we were saying before, you know, obviously as a kind of B Corp, I know, interested to hear kind of maybe Martin, your view on that as well.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. And I know Leor's firm is very into this sort of area as well. But I do think I'm always disappointed when it's client. I mean, obviously, client demands lead this area a lot, and especially because you're required to put it on tenders and such like now. What do you do? I think it's also led by recruitment as well, and I think it's driven by recruitment, because a lot of the sort of younger, newer people into our businesses want to see that the firm actually, this is important, and it's not just something that you talk about on the website, and there is a certain amount, and that's why I was quite surprised to see such a high level, because there is a certain amount of purpose washing going on out there, that people will talk about these things and their ESG agendas and their people and such like, and it's not always as authentic as it might be. But it's good to see. I mean, I'm really pleased that people are putting this high up on their agenda, because I think it is really important for all of us to see that this is an important. I mean, for me, it's more important than AI actually. But and I think for the success and sustainability of businesses, they need to put this very high on their agenda.
Martin, staying with you for a second, if I may, do you want to give us a little bit of a back story on your B Corp journey? Because I think that might be helpful for people.
Well, B Corp, for those that don't know, is a certification of it's sort of making your business as a force for good. So it's using your business to make the world a better place, I suppose, in a way. It's a certification for the whole business. It's not easy to do. You have to show all the parts of your business and what you're doing to try and make for society, for the planet, for your staff. You're looking after them properly and caring about them and doing that properly. For us, we became a B Corp back in 2015 when we learned about it, because it was a movement that started in the States but is now worldwide. It felt that that's who we were. It was part of our DNA. We were looking for using our business to make a positive impact on society and the environment. And we now run our business as a triple bottom line. So it's profit, people, and planet. And those are very important principles for us to run our business by. And I think actually, there's now 28 law firms that are B Corps. Business is looking at this. We are behind this thing called the Better Business Act, which is trying to improve businesses and make them think about things such as sustainability and running their business in a more sustainable and in a better way. And I think that is the future of business, because I think unless you're thinking about these things now, you're not going to be around necessarily in the next 20 years.
Excellent.
Can I just
Leor,
jump with a quick plug in? Sorry,
please come in. Yeah, please do.
Thank you. No, I'm intrigued by everything Martin has said and agree entirely. In fact, if I may, on the 11th of July, the next meeting of the Strategy and Marketing Group is discussing B Corp. And we have two professional service firms that I hope to announce next week who would talk about their journey, their learnings, their experience. And we've conceived of that for many of the reasons that Martin's articulated, because the committee of the Strategy and Marketing Group are all thinking about how do we do it, what are the pitfalls, what are the processes, what are the benefits, does it suit us? So it's very much the zeitgeist in my group, which is why we're hopefully talking on the 11th of July, and anyone who would like to join that would be welcome.
Thanks for the plug. Very good. Well, the question I was going to ask you, Leor, was, I mean, a lot of people, I think, saw Martin's firm as, I'll say an outlier initially, but, this was something that was relatively unusual, and it's now heading more into the mainstream. And I'd be interested from your conversations with your peer group and bringing Alastair after that, as to what extent do you think that tide has shifted, and now Martin is seen more as that pioneer who saw the light earlier than others?
I think that's very much the case today. I think a few years ago, some in my community would have looked at it as greenwashing, and as something that would have been very difficult to evidence with the nature of many firms. But a lot of firms have caught up, improved processes, improved systems. I mean, just talking about my own firm, we moved into a new building a couple of years ago, which has been optimized from a variety of different environmental perspectives and has won awards. So we're now feeling a lot more comfortable about looking at something like B Corp, because it's authentic. And no good marketing leader would encourage their firm to make inauthentic statements or seek inauthentic badges, lest they be caught out and shown to be charlatans, which would obviously undermine reputation and recognition. So I think people feel that there's more evidence and more authenticity. There are still concerns. There are concerns about particularly reconciling some of the principles and standards with being a rule of law firm. If you are the type of firm that believes in access to justice and is willing and able to support clients in a variety of different situations, especially in defence scenarios, that can often be difficult to reconcile with some of the principles that are at the heart of B Corp. So I think that's a strategic challenge that people need to deal with. But the concern, as I say, about greenwashing has ebbed as a lot of firms have caught up with the standards that B Corp espouses.
I think that's very true. And I think for some law firms, sorry, Alastair, but I just think for some law firms particularly, the point about clients is a difficult one. And in terms of the types of law some do, types of clients as well, because we are very strict about who we act for. And such like. And the other point was just I want to make on the B Corp thing is that one of the principles of it is about continuing improvement. I did hear someone say to me, oh, it was very easy to get, as a professional services firm, it's very easy to get B Corp certification, but people forget actually the whole principle of B Corp is about continuing improvement. So you're always looking to improve your processes and always looking to do better. And that's where the framework of it becomes quite tough to keep going, especially for firms. Sorry, Alastair.
No, in fact, you made the point I was going to make about, I think one of the kind of positive things about those, I mean, particularly the B Corp certification, but obviously there are others, is it does give that kind of gold standard measurement, but it's not just a snapshot of a moment in time. It's a continued, certification improvement process. And I think, as schemes like that and others do become, more widely adopted, I think it does give more reassurance, exactly to the points that Leor was talking about in terms of, it's not just we've got a nice tone of phrase on the website that talks about purpose. We've actually got something that we can really live and breathe, and it's been kind of externally accredited.
Excellent. Well, I'm sorry to say that time really flies when you're enjoying yourself, doesn't it? That we've come to the end of the show nearly. So what I'm going to do is welcome the gallery view first, so we can see everybody at the same time. I'm going to invite, I'll start off with Leor, because he doesn't know this is happening. So Leor, what's the one thing that today's session has kind of reinforced in your mind, or you've gone away with as a new idea? What's just one thing in the last minute? Well, for everybody.
For me, it is the concerns around AI and the impact on team. And I know I've mentioned it several times, but I see a lot of people in my firm who are looking at AI and thinking about how we use it for process improvement, how we monetize it in client delivery, how we use it to reduce costs. And I think they're all noble and worthy and relevant causes. But I am, as I've said several times, very worried about team and training and development. And I will make that point to anyone who will listen, that we've got to think about the people and the way we resource. We are, after all, a knowledge business. And if we lose the training and development that we currently have in our system, we won't have the knowledge in the team in the medium term. So that's something I will be preoccupied with for many weeks and months to come.
Thanks, Leor. So we're going to have AI Luddites next, are we? Okay, Martin, over to you. What's your one takeaway?
My one takeaway, what I was heartened actually most by your track and the survey results that Alastair produced was the emphasis on clients and client feedback and the client experience, because I think that is something that does get forgotten about in all of these discussions, and I do think clients are our lifeblood, and that's where we should be focusing.
Alastair, what's your takeaway for today?
I think just that we're seeing a lot more strategy marketing leaders getting involved in the AI conversation, which I think is great. That's been a big, shift, I think, in the last 6 months, and clearly presents, as Leor and others have said, challenges, but opportunities as well. And to be at the forefront of the conversation, collaborating, shaping it internally, I think is the right place to be.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Fantastic panel. Thank you, Leor. Thank you, Martin, and my co-host. And thank you, Alastair, for your fantastic. And what I didn't say was that Alastair, I think I may have said, actually, Alastair got the data on Tuesday night, and he'd produced by Thursday morning that amazing deck. And I'd done something rather amateurish, in case for whatever reason, like John today, he couldn't make it, but it wasn't necessary. And fantastic, really great insights. It's a real master at work. So thank you for that, Alastair. We much appreciate it. And over to me, really nice to say just thank you very much for today. We're back in a month's time. We had a lot of more people on the show today, and you're mostly still here. Over 90% of the people who signed up first thing are still with us, which indicates we've kept you active and engaged early on a Friday morning. Hopefully the rain doesn't be too noisy much today. Have a lovely weekend when you get there, and otherwise it's bye from us. Bye for now.
Right.